Hi, everyone. Welcome to another amazing topic of conversation. I want to thank my sponsors, the Health Channel. So please sign up for their newsletter with everything regarding to your health. And if you need any workspaces, whether it's for 1 hour, a month, or a year, Alexa's Workspaces can make it happen. So, Ibis, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure having you, especially that now that we're hitting the 6-month mark, that we're 6 months away from a very important election.
Mm-hmm.
So before we begin, what is the Women League or the League of Women Voters?
The League of Women Voters. I am so excited to talk about our history. So the League was founded over 100 years ago when women earned the right to vote in the United States. The first chapter was in Chicago. It was founded by the suffragettes, and now it has expanded all over the United States. So I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Miami-Dade County.
And what do you do? What are the mission? What are your objectives?
So our group is concerned with voter education, access to voting, and voting rights. We do have stances on a variety of issues that affect quality of life, such as immigration, education, reproductive rights. But that being said, the foundation to protect and advocate on behalf of all those issues is to be able to vote on them. So our stance is that Miami-Dade County elections must remain open, free, and fair so that citizens can rest assured that their votes count and that candidates will adhere to the democratic process. In fact, our tagline is empowering voters, defending democracy. So that is the core of what we do.
Are you partisan or nonpartisan?
We are nonpartisan, so we are very proud to announce that we will never endorse any candidate or any political party. Our focus and our mission is to provide unbiased information, opportunities to participate in civic engagement, and to make sure that as voters, every vote counts.
Okay. So let me ask you something. Being nonpartisan and considering everything that's going on at this moment, how do you deal, for example, with educating the people, for example, about women's health and abortion rights, especially now in Florida?
So I think you're touching on something that is incredibly timely, but also timeless. At the League of Women Voters, we do believe in regards to reproductive rights that abortion is healthcare. We do believe that women in Miami-Dade County should have the right to make decisions about their own health, well-being, economic freedom, and to live their lives without interference from legislators in Tallahassee. So the League of Women Voters of Miami-Dade County will continue to advocate for women's rights to control their bodies and futures through full access to reproductive health care. And so in regards to what is happening this year, for some time, there have been movements made in Tallahassee by legislators to continue restricting the window by which women can seek an abortion. It was 24 weeks and then 15 weeks. And as of May 1st, it is 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
And so there is debate, especially not just in the community of activists and advocacy, but also in the medical community, how this will affect people seeking out healthcare in regards to their reproductive health, a lot of misinformation as well. And so now, as of May 1st, there is the 6-week ban is in effect. However, Floridians Protecting Freedom is a group that has gathered enough petition signatures successfully so that in November, voters can vote to enshrine a much larger window of time by which you can seek an abortion within a medically recommended window. And so
let me ask you one question. I heard, yes, abortion is going on the ballot in November.
Yes.
But as you know, when you get the ballot, you don't understand the wording. It's like they put the wording in such a way that you don't know if you're answering the yes or the no. Is that part of your education process?
Yes, so in regards to our mission of engaging voters in voter education, we regularly host these workshops called Decode the Ballot, because we are aware that ballot language has a lot of terminology, legalese, that can be difficult to understand, even for seasoned professionals. That's the thing. And so it's important to rely on organizations that are committed to demystifying, decoding the ballot. That's why we call those presentations, by that name, so that you have a very clear understanding of what you're voting yes or no on and what the implications are in the short term as well as the long term.
So you're talking about now about misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
How are you dealing with all the misinformation that there is right now?
So the thing is that the internet, right, which is where we get a lot of our news now and where we engage in a lot of civic dialogue and discourse, the internet is a great equalizer. So as much as the internet gives a platform to information that is scientifically accurate, that is vetted by experts, it can also provide a platform for information that is the exact opposite, information that doesn't abide by physical laws, but it's giving misinformation about how the body works or how medications work, how for example, a very large misinformation campaign is that pro-choice activists are advocating so that abortion can be performed up until including the 9th month.
Yeah, no, this is like ridiculous. I just got an email about that.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that we're in agreement on that, because the vast majority of women, seek an abortion. When they decide to get an abortion, they seek an abortion within the first 3 months of pregnancy. Why in other words, it's so much misogyny that is behind this misinformation, because it's making these condescending and very cruel assumptions of how women judge their situations, their bodies, and their decisions. And so that is something that we want to, for example, dispel from the get-go, that we do not believe that that is not a real phenomenon. That's not what's happening. And in the rare cases that an abortion needs to be terminated past the 4th or 5th month, that is a conversation that should take place between the person who's pregnant and their doctor. Because there are rare situations, and now a lot of medical staff, they're very concerned that if a pregnancy is not viable, the fetus can become septic inside of the person who is pregnant. And so you have a medical emergency that is emerging, but because the law is abiding by a certain ideology and not necessarily not guided by medical fact, you have women and people who are pregnant that can get seriously affected, up to and including paying with their lives.
Well, in all disclosure, I have 2 personal stories that I want to share. One, with my first son, I had no clue I was pregnant until 2 months and a half, when I wasn't feeling well. And my doctor decided for me to come to a visit, and he said, well, guess what? You're pregnant. And it's over 2 months.
So how many weeks is, 8, 9, 10?
It was like 10 weeks when I found out that I was pregnant, and I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then on my 3rd pregnancy, I had no idea either that I was pregnant. I woke up one day and I couldn't walk. I had to go into the emergency, and literally the order said lost IUD. That was the order for a sonogram. And at that time, the sonogram was like, they only did it on rare occasions. And when they did the sonogram, they said, your IUD is stuck in your uterus. You need to take it out, or it's going to rip your uterus out. And by the way, you're pregnant. That's how. And it was but I was able to, I didn't know the doctor. I was all alone here. So I started crying, but it was a decision that I made at that point. And he said, we need to do this, but you may lose the baby. But that wasn't a choice at that moment. That was like making a choice whether I had a rip in my uterus
Oh,
because the IUD literally was stuck on the top of the uterus. So they needed to take it out regardless.
oh, wow.
And if it was now at this point, I don't know what I would have done. Because that is not making a choice or not a choice. That is, I couldn't walk. The pain was so bad, and we had no idea what was going on.
That's a very powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing with me and everyone who is watching and listening right now, because you see, these kinds of, for example, would you say that your situation is right wing or left wing or, you know, or independent? What happened was a medical
Well, it was
situation,
a medical emergency.
and that
At
can
that
happen to
point,
anyone.
I wasn't even living in the United States. I was here on vacation. So at that point, I had no clue about left, right, if abortion was available, if a doctor was available. I didn't know. I just knew I had to do a procedure and I had to do it right away.
Mhm.
So, women in my position, what do I do? It's being decided by a political point of view and not by medical backgrounds.
No. And I think this is where we are living, you know, it's not unique in human history, but I do find it sad that in the age of information, right? When you think of the future and flying cars and computers in our hands, that our judgment and our knowledge would evolve with that as well. But sometimes human history, there's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back.
Yeah,
And
but this is like 100 years back.
Exactly. You've made my point exactly. And so it is frightening that as voters, as citizens, as women, as people who can get pregnant, that we're living in, you know, something that can be described as the death of expertise, where educated medical opinions are not taken into account when, you know, when formulating legislation like this, when it's being passed, and the real effect it has on people who get pregnant, because at the end of the day, all kinds of pregnant people can experience an emergency and
But
make a
this
decision
is
they may not have thought about.
but this is based on you and your body. I don't think
Mhm.
elected officials have the right to interfere on what we want to do.
And not to mention, something else I would like to talk about is that typically, you know, I've noticed a lot of language where this, you know, further and further restrictions are always assuaged, right? With, oh, but there's exceptions for rape and incest.
What do you mean
And,
exceptions? Yeah, rape and
but
incest, but 6 weeks, 6 weeks you don't know.
at 6 weeks, not only do you not know, but the process by which you convict someone of rape or incest in and of
It can take a year or more.
oh, it can take years
So
easily.
what? Until they take it, what happens to this person? They have to give birth. Like,
And so you shared a story, so I would like to share a story as well. So part of my background, I studied in Latin America. So when I was living in the region, there was a story that broke out of a young girl. She was no older than 10, and she got pregnant by her father figure. So of course, it was salacious, it was scandalous, it was one of the worst forms of violation, you know, not only from your own guardian, but on top of that, onto a minor. And the country was on fire. And, you know, will she get an abortion? Should she? Won't she? And in her town, the priest in her local church told her that if you get an abortion, that will be a worse sin than what was done to you.
I remember that story.
Ah, and so when the little girl was, and not to mention again, this policy not being guided by scientific, like medically sound facts. Just because a little girl can get pregnant doesn't mean that she should stay pregnant, because the body is not developed enough to carry a baby to term, right? And so I remember I had friends among activist communities, and they were trying to source, for example, an abortion practitioner for her. So over Skype, I got in touch with this organization called Women on Waves. So what they do is that they essentially park their boats in international waters right off the
Like
coast of.
Women on Wheels, like the carts that go to the border of the states.
Oh, wow.
There are like now trucks equipped, and they park themselves like in the border of certain states where abortion is not permitted. And you just
Oh,
cross the line and they move from state to state trying to help women that cannot afford to travel.
interesting. So I don't know if they're officially partners or not, but I guess there's one by land, one by sea. And so I established contact and I said, okay, I have some contacts that are a couple of degrees away from this little girl. I will let you know if she consents to the abortion or not. But I think she ended up carrying the pregnancy. She gave birth, and then 3 months later, she died.
She died.
She died.
Who's raising that baby? That's the other issue, that nobody is asking who's raising those babies, what happens. And we're going back to remember the hanger time? When they literally tried to do abortion with the hangers, with the wire hangers.
Which is very, it's that kills a woman altogether. Absolutely. And so, that is something that can and will become much more common in the United States if 6-week bans are upheld. Those laws
Correct.
are so restrictive on purpose that those are the situations they create. And even if you decide to subject yourself to the process of attempting to report a rape, attempting to report incest, that process in itself is not always unbiased. It really can break survivors of those experiences, and it can
People
take
don't understand that.
how
That they
traumatizing it can be.
need, correct, that they need to report it, that it needs to go through court, that it needs to be like documented before it actually happened. Well, after it happened, but before it is actually denominated as a crime.
Yes.
So
Yes,
if they don't have that paper, then they are not allowed to get an abortion. So basically they're stuck.
they are stuck, indeed. And so those are tragic outcomes that we will be seeing much, I'm speculating higher rates of suicide because, when someone is forced to carry a pregnancy that they do not want to or they cannot, but the law affords them no other option, that devolves into a mental health crisis that also affects, the workforce. It affects, really, there's so many angles by which this has disastrous outcomes. And but it also is pressing on an interesting part of an interesting aspect of the law as it relates to telehealth. So because of the rise of technology and all these, telehealth options, like for instance, in full transparency, I get my birth control via Nurx. So Nurx, Nurx, is a telehealth app that, you're able to get birth control across state lines or a prescription. I just have to answer some questions. For example, take my blood pressure remotely, enter it into a questionnaire. A nurse practitioner reviews it and then sends me a prescription. And this is all online. So it's a really cost-effective and much more accessible way sometimes of getting medications like birth control. And in some cases, some telehealth applications are also offering medical abortion. So if you are within a certain window that you can take the abortion pill, you know, people who are getting pregnant are also looking to that as options. So this is also, you know, it's body rights, but also consumer rights as well. If you think about it, like if you cannot physically travel somewhere else, because women can pay upwards of $2,000 or more just in traveling, out of state costs, you know, the abortion
Not
itself.
only out of state costs, the time that that they have to take out of
And
work,
time.
not being paid, and then your body needs to recoup.
Yes, absolutely. And so now there is a bit of a legal quandary when it comes to women requesting medical abortions via telehealth applications. And so this is also a matter of states' rights as well. You know, if there is such a demand and a need that women are looking beyond their state, you know, will future legislation also restrict via that avenue as well?
We really need to step on the education process and let
Yeah.
women know what's going on, because it's not pro-life or not pro-life, it's a pro-choice.
Yeah, because it's the way I explain it just personally to people. It's like my views on divorce. I'm not saying you should get a divorce immediately, but you want the option there in case it is the
It's
best
needed,
option available.
correct?
You need it. You know, I would never tell a happily married couple you need to divorce. Like, you see how absurd and out of place that is. So then therefore, why would a pro-choice
Correct, it is not a
abortion,
simple
like it
choice.
doesn't, it literally, again, it doesn't make any sense. We're not advocating that people just get an abortion if the option is available. It's having it there just in case, if it's right for you and your situation.
So moving on to a different question,
Yes.
democracy. It
Mhm.
is what you guys do. You educate the people on democracy and on voting. And I'm going to be very honest, I am very worried about the latest communications of Trump saying that he will not abide by the results of the next election. So we're just crossing the 6-month period to get to an election. And we already know that if he wins, everything is okay. But if he loses, he will not abide by an election. So what's going to happen? Are we facing another January 6th? Like, how do you educate the people in that sense? And yesterday there were 2 senators that also replied the same thing. Nobody wants to commit to accepting the results of the next election.
So essentially, you know, keeping in line with our nonpartisan status, right? It's not a matter of us liking or not liking
No,
a
no,
candidate.
no,
But
it's not about a matter of liking or not. It's a
however, I
matter of
do.
respecting the
It's a matter of respecting democratic institutions, because
correct.
the same institutions that have delivered Republican presidents, Republican
Yeah,
candidates, Democratic candidates. It's a matter of, you know, building up trust in, for example, vote by mail. That is something that has been decimated in the state of Florida. So what we have now is a situation where, for example, abortion is on the ballot in November, right? There are heavy restrictions, but there is a chance to enshrine it in law and lengthen the window to a more medically appropriate length of time. However, this is also happening at the same time that voting is becoming increasingly complex. Before, when you registered to vote by mail, it was your request was standing for multiple election cycles. So you would do it once and not have to think about it for a long time. But in 2022, the vote by mail rolls were purged. So if you had a standing request, all of a sudden you had to re-request. And what's disconcerting about that is, you know, imagine all the issues that people have to deal with on a daily basis. You're working, you're paying your bills, you're dealing with life situations. There's always a running list of, things to do. But registering to vote by mail was not really one of them, as long as you did it once and were on top of
Yeah,
it. And
because you just waited for your envelope and that was it.
exactly. But now it only lasts for one election cycle. So you need to be in the habit of renewing your vote by mail request
And
more.
people don't know that.
And even seasoned super voters do not know that.
They don't know it.
And so the League of Women Voters, very specifically, this year, we are starting a campaign called Plan Your Vote. We are right now in planning your vote. Make sure that your voter registration is up to date. Make sure that your vote by mail request is standing and up to date.
How do you check that it is, that
Mhm.
you requested
the good
the
thing is
vote by
that
mail is okay?
if you go to our website, we have front and center the link by which you can check directly with the state of Florida, the status of your voter registration. And once that is up to date, you can also request your vote by mail.
What's your webpage?
Our webpage is lwvmiamidade.org.
Okay, perfect. So if anybody wants to check their status, then please check it out.
Absolutely. And that's why we are here, to provide that specific, crucial, all-important voting access and voter education support.
So another question, and I think this is our last question because we're not going to have any more time. The Hispanic community, especially in Florida, has grown exponentially. And as you were telling me before we started, we have become a real economic force.
Yes.
But the Hispanics do not vote. There is a very small percentage of Hispanic people that actually vote. What are you guys doing regarding that?
So in full transparency, I am Cuban American. So I am part of the Latino community. I think that to even begin answering the question, like the Latino voting bloc is just so big. And because it's so big, you're going to find a variety of, I think the best way to break us up, to make us easier to understand, is separating us by nationality. So if you see, for example, the Cuban American community is a highly engaged electorate because immigration law has made it such that it has, generally speaking, voting and voting status has been made more accessible to us than other ethnic groups, such as Central Americans, Mexicans, South Americans, etc. But then you have, for example, Venezuelans also vote at very high rates. So I would say breaking it down by nationality as well as geography. Where is it that we're engaged to vote? There's a reason why, for example, the Cuban American community, as relatively small as we are in the span of the United States, we are considered an important, an active voting bloc, right? So a lot of it has to do.
Been ingrained in your mind, in your education, since all the Cubans got here and got together as a group.
As a group, yes, we are overall, statistically speaking, we are a highly engaged electorate. So I would say there's no one easy answer to that question. However, it's all about addressing, a lot of it is immigration policy, a lot of it is immigration status as well. There are people who want, Hispanics who want to be civically engaged, they want to vote, but it's a matter of addressing the broken immigration system, the way by which people can fall through the cracks. And it's very difficult to reach a point sometimes where you are then eligible to vote as a citizen. So really it's not so much of, it is a voting question by way of it being a citizenship question. How are we making citizenship, the path to citizenship, accessible enough that more Hispanics can participate in our democracy?
But even the ones that are eligible to vote, they're not voting.
And a lot of that has to do with, for example, candidates who are running for office. Are you of the community? Are you speaking to issues that are important to the Hispanic community? Are you treating us like condescendingly like a minority, or are you taking us seriously, as we were talking earlier, that we make almost 1/5 of the market share in the United States. The Hispanic market, economically speaking, is huge. So, a lot of it has to do with the approach, the narrative, the identity, and the issues that are affecting us is, every community has certain issues that gets us fired up to vote. So voter turnout is really dependent on referendums and campaigns that speak to our issues and seeing ourselves represented as well.
How are you reaching the community to educate them?
So we reach the community, we have very strategic partnerships. So the League of Women Voters, we work, for example, with community centers, with public libraries, centers of worship as well. We are agnostic in that sense. We will work with a church as much as a synagogue, as much as una mezquita, for example. We work with advocacy groups as well. So really, we have many different entry points. But first and foremost is our voter services, decode the ballot. So for example, it's been very popular to go to homeowners associations with them. I just want to give examples of where we show up, and especially our candidate forums, where we partner with municipalities.
But for example, associations like in my association, I've been 25 years and no, but you guys have not approach in that sense. This is the first time that I've known or I heard of decoding the ballot, which I love it.
Well, give me your homeowners association and we'll get right on it.
You're on. So Ibis, with that, I think we're really over time. I really want to thank you. I really want to thank you for educating everyone. And please, yes, everyone, we need to vote regardless of which side you're on, but let's vote. So with that, thank you everyone. Until next week, and above all, stay safe. And I hope that by next week, there will be peace in this world.
Thank you. Thank you so much.